So now that I've taken the masking fluid off this little fountain area on the left and the people, I'm going to mix a bit of grey to use on the fountain, which is cobalt blue and a touch of light red. And I'm putting in the shape of the inside of it first of all. Just a little hint of blue for the water, cobalt blue with a little hint of rose madder in it, so that the water in there does seem to be reflecting the sky. And because that area is in shadow, I've now got that strong mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine to put a bit of dark onto the inside of it. Use the very tip of the brush and be very careful. Again, around the outside of it as well. Getting darker as we get into that edge away from the light. Just leaving a few little hints of white paper to suggest the light catching it. Now, I'm just going to soften the bottom edge of that. Because it's a damp pavement, if I soften the bottom edge, it'll be easier later on to get the impression of reflection. Now for the people, I've got a number 2 brush. An opportunity to add a splash of different colour. I'm taking a bit of raw sienna and adding a touch of that cadmium red to it. So we'll put this one here in a sort of orangey coloured jacket. A rich dark brown for the trousers. That's ultramarine and burnt sienna. For the next one, we'll pick another colour. I've got here a little bit of cerulean blue. Different colour to anywhere else in the picture. And that's fine for the torso of the figure. And then maybe a bit of dark blue, some ultramarine for the legs. This one here, I think we'll have a little bit of yellow, just a touch of raw sienna for the jacket. This person's carrying a bag, just a little bit of detail, so I'll leave that a little shape out for that. And we can put a bit of brown in for that. Bit of burnt sienna with a touch of cobalt blue. You can vary these colours quite a lot. The important thing is that the little splashes of extra colour that don't appear anywhere else in the picture. Again, a colour for the trousers. If you bring these down to a point shape, that just gives the impression that the person is walking. We'll put a suggestion of dark brown in for the hair. Again, it's a long way away, not too much detail. Maybe a little bit of that dark to suggest a strap over the shoulder for that bag. And I think we need to tint the little faces. We obviously shan't be painting any detail on the faces, but we probably need to just tint them to take that whiteness off. So I've just got a little bit of raw sienna with a touch of burnt sienna, quite thin. And we'll just put a little bit of a tint onto that white dot. Maybe a bit of dark to emphasise the hair on one or two of them. Okay, now a little bit of that dark colour as well, that burnt sienna and ultramarine to put a touch more detail into the wall of this little fountain. And we'll just leave that to dry. So now that the figures are dried and that little fountain on the left, I need to try and give the impression of a wet pavement, showing just a hint of reflection. I'm going to do that by mixing a couple of colours. It's got to reflect the greys in the sky and some of the colour from the column itself. So I've started to mix a bit of grey with cobalt blue, rose madder and a bit of light red, just like the grey in the sky. And then to reflect some of the colour from the column itself, some of those rich darks, I've got some burnt sienna and ultramarine. Okay, now I'm going to start by taking a number 10 brush, and I'm just going to try and dampen the whole foreground area. Not wet through, just nice and damp. Don't flood it at this stage. It's a case of just getting a nice even film of water. And then I've got the grey. I'm going to drop some of the grey in around the base of the plinth. Careful not to smudge the edge of the little fountain. Bringing that down into there. And maybe a few hints of the dark. The dark, I think we'd get maybe a little hint of reflection from the lions. The reflection from the posts will definitely be there, but that'll have to be put on dry once this bit's been done. There's a bit of the dark from the edge of the plinth there. That needs touching in as well, I think. Certainly there's some reflection from under that wall of that little fountain. And maybe a touch more grey around there as well. And then I've got a damp flat brush, and I'm just going to do a bit of dragging down, gentle dragging down, nothing too drastic, just to start to give the impression of wet pavement. And as I say, reflection from the people and from the little metal posts has to be done once this is dry. Once the pavement area had dried, I took the remaining masking fluid off that little balustrade on the left-hand side. I've given that a coat of the Naples Yellow and Rose Madder wash, and while that's drying, we'll look at some reflections in the damp pavement. I've got that mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and just to give a feeling of reflection from these posts, I've got the number 2 brush, and I'm just putting a few marks in underneath them, just to give the impression of sort of loose reflections. Nothing too detailed. The marks are slightly broken. It's not an exact mirror image, it's just a hint of reflection. And with that same colour, I can start to suggest a bit of reflection from the figures as well. Again, it's an impression rather than too much detail. We need to get a reflection from that orangey red colour there, just a glimpse of it, not as bright on the pavement, a reflection of the cerulean blue. And again, it's a glimpse, it's not as bright as the actual coat. And then that hint of raw sienna for that one there. And then I'm just going to get a bit more of the dark grey, cobalt blue and light red, and put a few perspective lines in that suggest the paving. Not too neat and tidy, these need to be quite quick lines. A few lines going across as well. And we'll leave that to dry. So I can come now across to the left-hand side again, and starting at the top of the lamp, I've got a mixture of raw sienna and burnt sienna, because there's a hint of gold at the top there. Got the very fine number 2 brush, and I'm just working this detail in. Leaving a few little gaps to suggest the light catching them. And as I come further down, I need to charge up the brush again, make it a little bit redder. I'm adding a touch of light red to the mixture. And then I'm getting a nice rich dark brown, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. Shaping that detail a bit and softening it in with the number 2 brush. The little supports for the lamp. And then with the number 2 brush and the dark brown, just a bit more detail. there's a globe here, and to get that effect I'm going in quite strongly with that dark brown, but then really cleaning the brush and lightening it over towards the right hand side, just so that it softens in and creates a spherical effect. So now I've got the number 4 brush and I'm carrying on putting detail in for this lamp. It's got to be a much stronger tone than all the background colours to really bring it forward. And then as I work my way down, there's a couple of little bands which I'm going to suggest by just leaving a gap. And bringing it down to this little plinth that it sits on, still with this rich dark brown. Now I've got a rich dark grey, cobalt blue and light red, and I'm carrying on now to suggest the shadow inside this little balustrade here. Got a lighter grey now to bring in some shadow down this edge. And to strengthen up that grey slightly, a bit more cobalt blue and light red. Bringing that right down so that the side facing the light is a lot brighter. It's also starting to describe the shape of the structure now. Keeping this fairly simple, it's a suggestion of detail. A lot of the detail is actually formed by shadow, but it's a suggestion rather than being too literal. And now the suggestion of little gaps between the uprights in the balustrade. Just little bits of detail hinted at in the very foreground of the scene. A touch more shadow under there. And a bit more dark, I think, into this bottom part here. And that completes the picture. So to sum up with this project, you can see that I've chosen a portrait format for it because it really lends itself to the upright nature of the focal point, Nelson's column. I've also reserved my darkest tones for around that focal point, the lions and the plinth, and also for any details that are very much in the foreground. Finally, make sure that you get those reflections in the pavement right. If you do that dragging down with the flat brush too early, you just pull all the paint away. If you're too late and the paint has dried, you can't get that dragging down effect. The optimum time is just before the paint dries. So happy painting.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended version of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.